Welcome to RESGEN's Giving Life podcast, stories and conversations about life in Christ, everyday discipleship, and exploring ways that we as men can give life to others. My name is Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN, and I am so glad that you're joining me for today's episode. If this is your first time joining us, you're going to be so glad that you did because my guest today is a good friend of mine named Ted Cunningham. Ted is the pastor of Woodland Hills Church in Branson, Missouri, and is one of the most gifted communicators and comedians I know. He has been a speaker at the RESGEN Men's Summit and Date Night Comedy 2 of the last 3 years, and I am thrilled that he's joining us here on the Giving Life podcast. On today's episode, Ted and I are going to talk about so much great stuff, including the gift of being able to stay at the same church for almost 20 years, the importance of being intentional in our marriages and how we do that, and the role our own relationships with Christ play in having a strong relationship with our spouse. Get ready for a good one, my friends. Here is my conversation with Ted Cunningham. Well, Ted Cunningham, it is a true delight to have you on RESGEN's Giving Life podcast today.
I have been watching you put these together for months, and and you wouldn't bring me up until I was here for an event, and now we're here. We'll make it work.
It's good because usually I have to do these with people that are in their own home states and all that, and it's over technology. So it's so fun to actually have you here present with me. And of course, we were able to be together a couple months ago at the Men's Summit and Date Night Comedy, back for the second time. The first time was 2 years ago. But before we get into all that and just some of the specific messaging that you always bring with you and that I ask you to share with couples and with the men, first, this is going to be an introduction to some of the listeners to you. Okay. So give us a little snapshot of who is Ted Cunningham. This is a time to brag on your wife, your kids, all that kind of stuff, which I know you love to do. So give us the snapshot.
So this October, Amy and I will celebrate 25 years of marriage. We met on a blind date at Liberty University about 27 years ago now. And the night I met her, I looked at my buddy, said, I'm going to marry this woman. He said, you can't decide that. I said, I've already decided it. I honestly made the decision the night I met her on Smith Mountain Lake. It was a junior-senior cruise at Liberty. And she's from Minnesota. She was living in Nebraska at the time. And I went in and asked her father to marry her. And we wanted to break all the rules and get married between her junior and senior year of college. I had just graduated. She had a year left. And so we got married. She finished school. We served a couple years in South Georgia at a church and moved to Dallas Seminary, Forest Seminary, and then moved up to Branson over 20 years ago and started Woodland Hills Family Church. And then we started our family. I have a soon-to-be 18-year-old daughter, Corinne, a soon-to-be 16-year-old son, Carson. Just bought my last car for a child. I didn't buy it. I helped him buy it.
I helped him buy it.
Make sure that's clear. He put the money in. So we've been in Branson, Missouri now for over 20 years, and so it's been a crazy ride. But I love the family. I pastor at Woodland Hills Family Church. We'll be actually 19 years old next month, and so our passion is the local church and marriage. And marriage ministry and how we bring those two things together.
And the neat thing about is, number one, there's a lot of neat things, but you've stayed at one church for coming up on 19 years. And obviously, the church was started 19 years ago. And to be a pastor who has stayed, and that has not been without its challenges. You've had to journey through some difficult times, including right away. As a 26-year-old, pastor.
And I joke with our congregation because we're a pretty small town. We're a town of 10,000 people, but we minister to millions of tourists a year that come. We're a tourist destination.
Right.
But we prayed before going to Branson, Lord, let us be at one church the rest of our lives. And so my joke with the congregation is I am going to outlive most. That's the goal. The goal is to pastor everybody in Branson at least one time. You know how people hop around churches. So I'm going to pastor everybody at least once. And it's an effective pastoring method that I never really planned on, but just outlive your critics. Just outlive them, and they'll move on. But it is. when COVID hit, I just immediately, I didn't make a decision. We didn't have meetings about it, but I just immediately became more local church. And a lot of my pastor friends who are gifted evangelists, and God's called them to that, got super excited about the widespread reach that their church would have. And you would hear pastors, man, we had 10,000 people watching, 20,000 people watching, 30,000. That's just not how God has wired me. I immediately was like, how are we going to keep our congregation connected? And how are we going to continue to reach out into this local community? And so we got creative. And, I said early on, how we lead through the pandemic will decide how people follow us long after the pandemic. And so that's what 2020 was for me. It was a good reminder of how much I love the local church and serving a local body and getting into the lives of people and just shepherding over a long period of time.
Yeah. Well, that speaks to really who you are as well, because you, like me, we're relationship guys.
Yeah.
We love to develop and then grow in those relationships, which is one of the reasons why, when you came to be a part of Date Night and the Men's Summit 2 years ago, which really was the first night I'd never even heard of Date Night comedy. Yeah. And
now you stole the brand. And so that's it. I gave it to you.
With your blessing, that's true. But it was the development of that relationship and friendship that now has continued on, and to be able to invite you back and continue to grow your relationship with the people here of the Sioux Falls and South Dakota region. I think that, and just people now that are listening in, they're going to get to know just how deep of a desire it is for you to grow in your relationship, number one, with Jesus personally, and then allow that to influence the way that you treat and grow your relationships with other people. And so to be able to stay in an environment like that, where it is very transient, like you said, not in necessarily, we don't think of transient like homeless people, but I'm talking like they're coming for vacation for a week or 2 weeks or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And you have the unique opportunity to speak into their lives some meaning, some purpose while they're on vacation.
Yeah. And so we have folks that, say you're our church away from home. Again, even through the pandemic, and it's been interesting to watch how pastors and in the circles that we run with are discussing this. If someone comes to know the Lord through a church, here in Sioux Falls, but they're in Florida, I ask the question, I have to as a local pastor, is your expectation that they come up here to get baptized? Or is your expectation that they find a local church in Florida to plug into? And that's still always my heart for the local church, where you're going to take the Lord's Supper with the local community. You're going to be baptized. You're going to be married. You're going to be buried. You're going to be confronted with your sin, church discipline. So when people say you're a church away from home, I am always one to go back to make sure you're pouring into your actual church back home. And not just tuning into our church on the weekends. And I know this is a big debate, and guys have really been getting on me about this, saying, no, you got to think broader. I just don't know how to be a local church around the world without relying. If someone comes to know the Lord in Sioux Falls by watching Woodland Hills and Branson, I'm going to tell them about your church.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell them, you got to plug into a local community.
Body.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you need a local body. That's so important. And you're in a unique opportunity as well with your church, the way that the church allows you, gives you the opportunity to not only minister locally, on a weekly basis, or however many Sundays you're able to be at home, but you're also able to go and speak to thousands of people through things, like the Summit or Date Night here in Sioux Falls, or other just tons of events all over the country. Yeah. So how has that relationship worked? Because even just as a church, because I think we have sometimes we like pastors feel like, gosh, what do we do? Because how do we handle the expectations of the people,
right?
Of the congregation,
right?
Of the, okay, you're here to serve us kind of mentality.
Yeah. So, we started, going on 20 years now. Dr. Gary Smalley was one of our first elders. He was my mentor. He's been with the Lord now for 5 years, but Gary, early on, as he mentored me in my own marriage, and then mentored me in marriage ministry, said, we're sending you out as a missionary. Okay. Let your priority be the church, and then go out. And he sees it all working together. And I just remember him casting that vision for our church. We continue to cast that vision. We have a teaching team, so I don't do all the teaching. I think it's just healthy for a church. If I were to fall off the face of the earth tomorrow, the church would continue on. We have multiple teachers on our team. And so it's actually healthier, I believe, for the church that I'm not there micromanaging and controlling every move that the church makes. It's like we have a qualified elder board, we have great staff, we have great lay leaders, and so it's neat to be a part of it, but it's fun to watch how God has used that over the years. I don't have a desire to leave. I don't have a desire to go do something else. There's not a greener pasture that I'm looking for. I'm content with where God has called me to. And again, he could always call me somewhere else. I totally get that. But we prayed and asked, Lord, let us stick in one place, in one church, invest deeply into that community, into that church. And actually our church now, you talk to most people, they very much feel a part of what I'm doing in Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
They think it's cool that a lot of what's been developed at Woodland Hills is able to be shared here at Central Church or all the other churches that are represented. So it's about setting the expectations and letting folks know that this is my priority. But all the ministry that I do, including Sioux Falls, is the overflow.
Yeah. And it really helps because you love Branson. I mean, you love your city.
I was born for Branson. And they call it Hillbilly Vegas. But I mean, think about this, Tom, for just a second. I grew up in Chicago, only kid in my public junior high and high school who listened to country music. I remember in 6th grade doing a country music speech with my little boombox up on the deal, and I'd press play. Here's Lee Greenwood. Here's Mickey Gilley. Right? Here's Johnny Lee. Here's Mel Tillis. And my classmates listening to Def Leppard are like, what are you doing? Right? They're listening to AC/DC and Kiss. They're like, you're the weirdest kid in this class. And I grew up listening to my dad's US 99 country music, the backseat of his Plymouth Volare. And now think about this. Now I am pastoring many of those that I listened to back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And on a very serious note, when, not to get into name, but when many of them have lost children, I'm the one that does the funeral. I mean, I just go, that only God puts all that together and gives someone with that heart. I did not go to Branson because of country music.
Right.
But you'll find me there in the shows, rocking out to Mo Bandy.
Yeah. And when you're not there, you're out fishing. I mean, you got this passion for fly fishing. Yeah.
We got some of the, I think we have some of the best fly fishing in the country.
Yeah. Sioux Falls doesn't.
Rapid City, you get out west.
There is some good stuff in spearfish. That is true on the other side of the state.
Is spearfish by Rapid City?
It is not too far away.
Okay.
It's. I mean, you got to throw a stone really far, but I mean, it's a little further west. But and Branson is beautiful. There's no question. I've enjoyed any time I've been in Branson.
Have you been to a show?
So yes,
you
I
did?
have been. I went.
Good.
Yeah. The Dixie Stampede.
No, I mean a country music show. I want one where you're rocking out.
No, we went to a Dixie Stampede. We went to...
It's now called the Stampede. Let's be correct.
Oh, okay. Well, when I went, it was the Dixie Stampede, so that's on no. And then, of course, we did Silver Dollar City. Is that what it's called? Silver Dollar City, the amusement park there. Yeah, which we had a great time. And then there was like a chuck wagon meal or something we did one time, too. It was like some sort of chuck wagon meal. So, but no, it's just beautiful country. But yeah, so Spearfish has some beautiful country as well. I know it's probably not. Maybe it's pretty Branson,
from
but
South Dakota ain't taking our chuck wagon seriously, though. Probably, I'm assuming.
Probably not. I mean, you've had the pork that we usually serve at the men's summit,
yes.
So you know we try to make sure that we got some good food here. But there is some really good food in Branson. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. So as you mentioned, you're passionate about the local church, but one of the things that really drives you and that I appreciate so much is your focus on building strong marriages that last, marriages that are, number one, focused on Christ, that have joy in them, that have laughter in them. And anybody that's heard you speak or really even shared time with you knows how much you love to laugh. You are a pastor and comedian, which is not a common combo,
Right.
but you do both of those well. Where does the passion for marriage come from?
Yeah, this is another one of those that I don't feel I drifted into it. I feel God has directed every step and has led me to this very moment, because I'm married in 1996. I'm an associate pastor at a church in South Georgia. My pastor, when we were back home, it was either Thanksgiving or Christmas, I can't remember. So this would have been late 96. I'm married 2 months. He goes, I want you to preach for me Sunday night. That's what it was. It was Sunday night. And I go, sure. And you know what I preached on? Marriage. Who wants to listen to a marriage sermon from a newlywed, from a guy married 2 months? I literally was married 2 months. And I look back on that, I go, how cocky was that? That I'm up there, I'm 22 years old, right, married 2 months, preaching. I could just see all the old guys sitting there with their arms crossed, looking at me like, who is this guy? And afterwards, I'll never forget, this old guy came up to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, settle down. And I said, I hope I don't ever settle down. So I get to, the church, and I'm 22, 23, associate pastor. I went to work for the guy that introduced Amy and I, Austin DeLoach, in South Georgia. And he said, you know what? I really don't want to preach on marriage or family. This is what he says to me, because he wasn't married yet. And I said, oh, okay, because he was in his 20s as well. And I said, well, what, you want me to do it? So then I started doing all the sermons at 22, 23, 24 years old. And I just look back on that. So I was studying Gary before I ever met him. I was studying James Dobson. I was studying Gary Chapman. I was studying all the marriage greats in the space. And then I get to Branson. I talked about this, at the summit. I get to Branson and go through a very difficult time at a church outside of Branson, a few towns over. And through that terrible church experience, Gary called me. And that's how I met Gary. And I'm like, wow, look at how this works. And he walked me through a very difficult season in my life and became my mentor, became Amy's mentor. We started the church with him. And it's just every step of the way, I was now not just reading Gary's books, I was helping him edit them. Then he would say, why don't you help me write this chapter? And then we ended up co-authoring 4 books together. And this is why I had somebody tell me, it was actually an editor on a book just a year or two ago, said, you quote Gary too much in your books. That's what she said to me. She said, it takes away from your credibility. And I just simply, in a kind way, responded back to her, I call that honor. I realize where everything I'm doing, I mean, I know the Lord has directed me to this moment.
Sure.
But if you think of the Paul-Timothy relationship, I had that with Gary. He was Paul to me in a big way. And even while doing date night comedy here in Sioux Falls, Norma texted me because I had my birthday while I was here. And she texted me and said, happy birthday. And I said, I talked about you and Gary last night. And she goes, it better have been nothing but good stuff. I said, it was only good stuff. She's afraid I'm going to give the behind the scenes stuff. And but I said, I just enjoy still talking about him 5 years later and reminding people. And it's kind of, what's the idea that dance with the one who brung you, right? What I don't for the life of me see the need to move away from that, but to remind people, because my desire, and that's what I love about your ministry, Tom, my desire is that every guy listening would have a Gary or a Paul in their life and you don't need dozens of them. Yeah. You don't need half a dozen. You just need one. And that will take you. And now mine is gone, and I don't have another one. But I still have Gary. I mean, I still have his books. I still have his messages. I'm still teaching so much of what he poured into me. On the day he died, or 4 days before he died, I went to see him down in Houston. And I walked in the room, and his big thing was the honor list. We talked about that at Date Night Comedy. And I had people from the church write honor list for him. And I just went and spent 2.5 hours with him. And he was in and out sleeping. He was done eating at that point, and he was on hospice care. And I just sat there, and he would hold my hand every now and then, and I just read all these honor lists, all these words of high value that people were speaking over him, kissed him on the forehead, say see you soon, and walked out of the room, and just feel like still continuing to share. I don't know how many times I don't know how many times I quoted him at Date Night Comedy, but it's often.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it shows the influence that he had on you. And then now you're seeking ways, and I know that this is what you do. You are now investing in so many others in the way that he invested in you. And I mean, in a small way, I know that obviously proximity doesn't allow that on a regular basis, but I mean, you've done that with me in so many different ways. And I think about guys out there that have had the privilege, the privilege of having guys like a Gary. For me, I had, my old youth pastor, Alan Keysbo. And
I met him.
Yeah. And then, and I still have people like my current pastor, Jeff, and my old youth, like ministry leader, Dan Larson, who's serving Young Life in Pueblo. And these guys that really poured into me, that now I feel this responsibility of how am I pouring into other people? And on a previous podcast, with Mike Goodwin, who obviously you got to share the stage with when you were here in January, talked about being generous with our knowledge, generous with our time, and investing in other people. And so there's a responsibility that when we've been too much that has been given, much is required, right? Yep. And so how are we pouring into someone else?
So this is a key for me. If you're a Timothy listening right now, desiring a Paul, I get this all the time. Don't call someone in the field that you're in or someone that you're like, that's the guy I want to spend time with, and invite him to lunch or coffee. Join him on his journey, whatever he's doing. And the fastest way to get a Paul, in my opinion, and what I've observed, I mean a relationship that lasts, find a way to serve that person. Serve them before seeking coffee with them. And for Gary, he'd have a gazebo delivered in pieces, like from IKEA that he had to, and it came on a truck that had to be, and I was over at his house unloading I would, help him plant a tree. There was all sorts of manual labor. I have another friend of mine, Joe White from Kanakuk Camps. People often say, Joe calls it discipleship, but I have another term for it. It's a lot like manual labor. Because Joe takes you with him. And whatever he's doing, you're doing it. And I just think you learn more that way versus just sitting down over coffee. And it's one of my passions for men's ministry and men's discipleship is to get back to walking along the way together. And working together. And so you'll be shocked. And in Gary's case, that was traveling with him and carrying his suitcase. It was editing chapters for him. It was reading something. And does this really make sense, Ted? Help me understand. That's what you do instead of, hey, you serve me. You come along me. Help me get started in my new business or my walk with Christ. No, I'm gonna serve you. I'm gonna pour into you, and I'll pick a ton up along the way.
Yeah, I remember when I first was starting RESGEN. This is now 11 years ago, and Bob Lenz, who was on a previous podcast as well. I don't know if you know Bob, but he was a guy that was doing festivals and school assemblies, and that was just something that felt like the Lord was leading me to, and I'd met him at a different event. Actually, I drove to Rapid City on the other side, the pretty side of the state that we already talked about, because he was speaking there, and then there was a couple members of some bands that I had met in a variety of ways that I was going to see as well. But I met him there, and then when it came time for me to start RESGEN, like about a year later, I called him up and I just said, "Can I drive to Appleton, Wisconsin, almost 9 hours away."
The pretty part of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It's the pretty part.
Right.
I've been to Appleton.
and watch you. That's literally what I said. Yeah. It's a little creepy, Ted.
It's a little creepy.
It is a little creepy. But he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I just want to come and I want to watch you do a school assembly. I want to watch you work with your team. I just want to sit in. I just want to just learn. I just want to glean from with no expectation of what he could do for me, but just how can I learn? And he's like, well, look, if you and I didn't have financial capacity, to put myself in a hotel and all this, but I was like, we're going to do it because this is what I feel like God's leading us towards. And so he said, well, if you're willing to drive, by for 8-9 hours, and you're willing to just come and do that, I've got a buddy that owns a hotel. I'll get you the hotel room, and then you can just come and watch me do some stuff and whatever. And I sat in on staff meetings, and I sat in on prayer times with the team, and for 3 days, and just wanting to learn. And we became friends. And at the end, he said, well, is there anything that I can do for you? And I said, well, I think you've already done a lot for me. I've learned a lot. And I said, but I really have no, I have no reason to believe that you would say yes to this, but you've got a festival. If you ever need a guy like me to come. And then he looked at me, I said, I'd be willing. And then he looked at me, Ted, and he says, I got to be honest with you. I don't need you. He said, very affirming. But he said, I mean, you don't have a name. No one's going to come to see you. No one is. But he said, but you have heart. And so I'm going to see what I can do. And I ended up coming, and I ended up preaching at 11 o'clock at night on the rock out stage, right before the last closing headliner every night, emceed through the day, on that stage, preached that night. And I, when he was on the podcast, I said, you taught me so much, and you gave me the opportunity when you didn't need to do that.
Yep.
And I think about your story, and just when you go and just with that service mentality, you don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And there was no guarantees, and I wasn't expecting that. So what would you say to a guy that's wanting to be mentored in some form or fashion, but they can't go on the, and every situation is different, but they can't go on the road and carry bags for a week because, they've got a family, they've got different things, responsibilities, but they still see something different, or they want to grow in this area?
Yeah, I just find I love groups. I think groups are valuable, and we obviously have them at our church. I'm just telling you, the people I see growing the most are the ones that are serving at the church. The ones who are serving, whether that's a community project or serving together in a ministry at church, it's, they're doing something together. And I think there's value in sitting down and learning and doing a study together. But I often think we think this is just the roll up the sleeves and get the job done. But I think we've really got to look hard at how much is happening here and growing here. It's the person that rarely shows up to any meetings, isn't serving in the church. They're not giving. They're not putting anything in, that eventually sits back and like, I ain't getting nothing out of this. Well, you're not putting nothing into it.
Yeah.
You're just wanting people to show up for you, but who are you showing up for? And so don't overlook the value. We're not just asking people to serve at church for us to get stuff done and for us to be able to, welcome people on Sunday morning. But I can tell you this, in my work with couples, when I'm coaching a couple, it's helping my marriage. It is. It's like I'm talking through things. I'm reminded of stuff. So I'm pouring into another couple, and I'm getting so much more out of it. You know that. When you're teaching, you can't just write an outline, memorize an outline, deliver the outline without it doing something to you. So I would just say, don't overlook serving as one of the greatest resources, avenues for plugging into someone. You don't have to go on the road 9 hours. You don't have to get on a plane and fly with somebody. But, find someone that can help you on your journey, and don't just go up with the request. Go up with the offer.
Yeah.
This is what I want to do. Can I help you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned coaching couples, and so I want to make sure that we spend a decent amount of time here before our time is up to talk about just marriage. Okay, so things that you're seeing right now, struggles that we're having in marriage. Marriage is something that really can be filled with joy. So talk with me just about some of the basic principles that most of our listeners are men.
Yeah.
That just some principles of marriage that maybe we are thinking too hard about, or making too difficult, or that we're just not aware of. I know that's kind of a broad thing, but I know that you can pare that down. But you just go.
I would submit to every guy listening that marriage is easier than you think, and I think sometimes we overthink it. And my friend Shanti Feldhahn says that most of the issues men deal with in marriage, it's mindlessness, not malice. And that's important because a wife can see it as malice. Like, you are doing this to hurt me. You're doing this to neglect me. You're doing this to not be sensitive to my needs, thoughts, opinions, whatever. But it's not that a guy's operating with malice. It's just a skill he's never picked up. It's something he doesn't notice. And so I love coaching more than counseling. Okay, so counseling answers the why.
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting into your family of origin. We're coming alongside you to figure out, how did your marriage get here? That's answering the why. Why are you at this point? Coaching is the how. It's, I want to get these skills into Tom, into Laura, into your muscle memory. Because when I sit down with a couple that's been married, I'm working with a couple now married 12 years, and lots of bad habits in their muscle memory.
Yeah.
And what does a coach do? A coach tells you the same thing over and over and over and over again. You're going to that free throw line, you're going to shoot that ball 50 times.
Yes.
And I'm going to get the right technique in your muscle memory so that you're not mindless with it, but that you're thinking it through and you're thoughtful in your approach. And I would say this to guys listening, because when we hear that there's going to be a marriage message at church, or our small group's going to do a marriage study, too many marriage messages start off with the idea marriage is hard. And marriage is difficult, it's painful, it will suck the life right out of you. But that is how God intended it to be.
Yeah.
And I'm going, no, and I always encourage guys, don't start with Genesis 3, start with Genesis 1 and 2. Male and female, he created them. I am one dad who's raising my son to embrace his biological sex and marry the opposite sex. I'm marrying my daughter to embrace her biological sex and marry the opposite sex. And then you get to Genesis 2, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two become one. We need to begin painting a beautiful picture of marriage for our children, for the next generation. We can get to Genesis 3 when sin enters the picture, but let's not start there. It's when my Reformed friends that I love, but when I'm doing an ordination and I get to the question about man, what do you believe about man? Man is evil. Okay, all right, hey, whoa. I appreciate your enthusiasm for depravity, but is that really where you want to start when we talk about man? And I had one buddy ask me, well, where would you start? I would start with created in the image of God.
Amen.
That's where you start.
Yeah.
We can get to the fact that you are evil and you are sinful, but I don't know why we need to start there. And I think too many of us have this confirmation bias, this confirmatory bias that says marriage is hard, so when I get up every day, I got to plod through it. I go back, and you've heard me share this verse I don't know how many times, Ecclesiastes 9:9, enjoy life with your wife, whom you love, all your meaningless days, for this is your lot in life, and in your toilsome labor under the sun. Toilsome there means grueling. God did not give you your spouse to be the grind. He gave you your spouse to go through the grind with. Your spouse is your teammate, not your opponent. So when I'm coaching couples, I have a course called Helping Couples Win that I love for couples to go through, because it starts with enjoying life together. We get to the tough stuff and working through it and the conversations. I know we need to get there, but I always want them to be reminded of where it started. It's where your marriage started. You were enjoying life together.
Yeah.
Most couples, whether they're divorced today or happily married, they all started the same in the attraction and chemistry and early connection. Enjoying one another, laughing together, touching each other, honoring one another, speaking kind words over one another. But then we drift away from that. I don't start with the drift when I'm working with couples. I start with painting a beautiful picture of marriage again. And Tom, that means for some couples, they didn't start with the beautiful picture of marriage. And so they're going to have something, not that they never dreamed possible. Like it never even dawned on them. It could be this good.
So you're saying there that they didn't see a good marriage modeled in their home.
Or even when they came together, it was all physical. They had physical intimacy, but no spiritual intimacy or emotional intimacy. And now as they've grown up, they're in their 30s, they're in their 40s, 50s. Now they're going, okay, there's got to be something more. And you can begin to paint that beautiful picture for them to say, I'm not here to help you get back to what you had. I want to help you experience something that you never dreamed possible. And that's enjoying life together.
Yeah. So how do you respond, Ted, when there's a couple that they are on the opposite end of enjoyment?
Yeah.
I mean, they're on the endurement. I mean, they're just like, it's not enjoying, it is enduring right now. And you're trying to coach them through getting them back to enjoyment. Because I know that there's maybe a lot of listeners that are saying, man, we just haven't had fun. It's been focused on too much on productivity or work or, I mean, whatever. And 2020 was hard on marriages.
Yeah.
And just like there's always different things that impact marriages, but 2020 was hard and trying to figure out, financial challenges, or now all of a sudden we're around each other all the time.
And it's time, not necessarily quality time.
Exactly. It was quantity that didn't turn into quality, but so how does that shift in the mindset, or how can you get back to the enjoyment process when it's just not that?
Well, I'm glad you said a shift in the mindset, because the church, we teach exclusivity, but we don't often teach intimacy. And I'm passionate about teaching the exclusivity of marriage. One man, one woman, one lifetime. You're together until the Lord returns or takes one of you home.
Yeah.
Okay, it's that clear what exclusivity. And I've not met a pastor who doesn't agree with that exclusivity in marriage. The problem is we stop there in a lot of marriages. And I mean, there's a lot of believers in the church. We're staying together, but we don't enjoy life together.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help couples not just stay together. I don't want the anniversary card at 50. You made it. What kind of card is that?
Yeah.
Congratulations. You sucked it up and you got here and I want at 50 to be enjoying marriage in a way I'm not enjoying it at 25. I'm enjoying marriage right now, but I want it to be better. I don't want to be that couple sitting at Cracker Barrel slurping soup, not talking to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be enjoying life at 50. So it's not just staying together, but I think some people think we did that. We did that. We endured. We persevered. No, enjoy life together. Find ways to enjoy life together. When I think of the warning that the church at Ephesus got, you're doing great things, good work, great deeds, right? You've persevered, you've endured, but you have forgotten your first love. And so I want couples to know they can experience high levels of marital satisfaction. And the reason is it's because there are factors and skills that lead to it in any season or stage of life. So don't fall for the lie that says we can't enjoy it right now, but we will later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, you can enjoy it now. Don't fall for that idea that it's in a distant season or a distant stage. It can be right now, and then from here on out in all the new seasons and all the new stages that all of us are going to go through.
Yeah, and a lot of times that season that they're looking forward to is that empty nest season. Well, once we get done with, like when our kids are little, it's once we get through this, and then they're in school, and then it's okay. Once we're done with all the softball games, or then once we're done with middle school and high school drama, then we can finally. But you're really saying there's ways to enjoy each and every stage. Are there challenges with each stage? 100%, of course. But there are ways to enjoy that. And so one of the things that I know that you've really taught for a very long time, and that you talked about this past year at Date Night Comedy, was this idea of daily connection with one another, which I think, if I could make a guess, that's one of the biggest problems that we see in marriages is just the complete lack of communication. Though not moving in the same direction, but just moving in all sorts of directions, running all over, all over town. We don't connect. Yeah. But you talk about something that's called the daily delay. So what does that look like? The
daily delay is that 15 to 20 minutes a day of eyeball to eyeball, body to body, distraction-free, kid-free, tech-free time. I call it a little business meeting. It really helps keep short accounts so we can protect our weekly withdrawal. The weekly withdrawal is our date night. And date night is just fun. We do something new. We try new places to eat. We want to keep that fresh, and nothing will destroy a date night faster than talking about the kids or budgets or schedules. Keep that in the daily delay. But for Amy and I, our daily delay is early morning. Before the kids get up, before the dogs get running around. I mean, we are early morning people.
Okay.
We tend to crash at night, but we love getting up early. And I've kind of taken this principle on in my work too. I try to make everything before noon my creative time. And I try to do the maintenance in the afternoon. I have a couple coaching calls that I have to do with, some of the folks that I coach, and sometimes it has to be at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and I get that, but it's just whatever your best hours are. Amy and I have decided our time together is in the best hours. We're not going to be this couple that's fallen asleep at 9 or 10 o'clock at night in the family room and decide this will be our time. That's just not our best time. And we offer each other tons of grace in the evening hours because we just know we've been running for 12, 14 hours.
But that's opposite of what we most do, right?
We
We hit the ground running the minute we get up, and then we get to the end of the day, and we really don't have anything left over.
Nope. Now, there are some couples that are not morning people, and they roll out of bed and go to work. And I'm not, this isn't legalistic at all. So do your thing, do what works. And some people, it's a phone call after they get in the car and get going, they have with each other. Others, it's after work, it's that reconnection point. I will say this, though. Most couples tell me that first 15 to 20 minutes home is not a good time. There's just too much, and they're decompressing. They thought about a couple little things they needed to do around the house when they got home, or they're getting dinner started. So don't put pressure on yourself for a time slot that doesn't work. I mean, just know what time works, but then commit to that time. There was a couple of years there where we had we have a couple daily delays, actually. When the kids were small, they cleared the table, went and started on homework, bath, whatever they needed to do, and we stayed at the table for 15 or 20 minutes. So every couple's going to work out different. I know couples that love to stay up. I don't know how they do it till midnight. Good for them. And yours may be right after the kids go to bed. If you can have that time, you'll have to get creative. Amy and I are fortunate that both of us are morning people. So you'll have to get creative if one of you is a morning person, one of you is a night person. But pick what time works for you, and then make that date night about fun. Don't make that your weekly business meeting. Let that just be enjoying one another, dreaming about the future, picturing a special future for each other. Yeah.
So then what about when you're on the road? Because there's
our daily delays on the road are probably better even than at home.
Okay. So guys that are traveling, which I know that obviously there hasn't been near as much traveling going on since 2020 and COVID and all that. But once that really picks back up again, it's very easy to just be, okay, for me, I'll just speak from experience. So when I'd be on the road, Laura's very busy at home. She's trying to get a bunch of stuff with the kids or her own work or whatever. And then when she's finally able to, I'm doing a lot of my speaking and different things at night. And so trying to figure out, okay, at least let's touch base via text. But it's hard. That creates some challenges. So what are some ideas or how can that work? How has it worked for you?
Yeah. So the last thing we do before bed is we gather together as a family and pray. And, for years it was every member of the family prayed, and we just took turns, and changed up the order, and the kids would pick the order that night, and we would all four pray. A lot of times now it's just one of us praying, but we all pray together before bed, and then we disperse, and then Amy and I pray together. The very last thing I do every night before we drift off is pray, give her a kiss, good night, and that's it. On the last date night comedy, I knew it ended at 9. I'd be at the book table till 9:30. I knew I'd get back to the hotel at 9:45, which is around the time we start to do the prayer at home. And so, I'm able to, and with technology, we really don't have an excuse to avoid it or to miss it, to take the time and to make it a priority. And I'm gone for 2 days most of the time at a time. Sometimes it's 3 days at a time. But we connect as often, if not more. It's almost more intentional. Like, hey, this is our little time slot right now, so we're taking advantage of it, making the most of it.
Yeah, and the key is intentional and your purpose to do it. I think about the statement that I shared that some of Craig Rochelle's wasn't mine, but if it's important, you'll find a way.
Yep.
If it's not, you'll create an excuse. Right.
That's exactly right.
And there's no shortage of excuses.
Yeah.
There's just no shortage of excuses. But you really have to be purposeful in doing that, even at home too, because there's always another Netflix show. There's always I know you're very passionate about barbecue right now, and so you're watching a lot of Netflix documentaries on barbecue stuff. And there's always another one. There's times where we just need to, and I love that you said technology free, where you say, okay, look, I'm going to put my phone or whatever, the TV off for this period of time and just focus.
Yeah, and the reason with the phone literally in the other room is because we'll say something or plan something, and we both get our phones out to put it on the calendar. It's like, and now the phone's out, and it's involved in the conversation.
Yes.
Or, did you hear from so-and-so today? I didn't. I think they texted us. Did they text us? And we grab the phone, and we're like, okay, no. I mean, we always find a way to bring the phone out and share something or plan something or get something in there. And so anyway, that's why we put it in the other room. And that's why we've always had kind of the rule at our house. And we have older teenagers now, so rule's a strong word, but we don't have technology at the table. When we're eating. We're not that important, Tom. All right, we're just not that important. Okay, we don't.
We call them no phone zones in our house.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, there's certain times where it's in meal times when we get to have a meal together, and especially now with my son in college, and we don't get to see him very often. It's like, oh man, okay, let's make sure the phones are away.
Yeah.
And then, or if it's family night with a game or with a movie or whatever, and we just established that. And that did not mean that there wasn't times where we received pushback. I mean, we would, because our kids, and look, we like our phones too. Okay. So I'm not going to say just our kids like our phones.
We all do. Because we're all so important. We are so important. Right. The world will not go on if I do not get that tweet responded to.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we had to create those moments and be purposeful in that. And so but that is something that I think is so important to take away, is saying that unless we set those standards, unless we set that up, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. I think it was Craig Groeschel that gave me the idea of the tech-free drawer. Was that him years ago? I think it was.
Okay.
This could have been 10, 15 years ago. And so when our kids were real small, we did that. We cleared out a drawer, and that's when we wanted an hour or two or doing something, all the technology went in that drawer.
Yeah.
And when we would shut it, we'd just look at the drawer. How long's the door gonna be shut, Dad? How long's it been? It's like 3 minutes. Yeah. It's only been 3 minutes. How much longer? Right.
I'm starting to sweat. I'm starting to stress out.
My thumb is twitching.
Yeah, my heart's beating fast. I don't know what to do.
Oh man.
Okay, so I want to talk about just the importance of faith in the relationship really quick, because a lot of times in our relationships with each other, we can really be focused on the struggles that we're having in a relationship with, horizontally.
Yeah.
But not recognizing at times how important the relationship vertically with God influences our relationship horizontally, and how that relationship horizontally also impacts our relationship with God.
Yeah.
So, I mean, unpack that.
It's where we always have to start with a couple, because they want to fix the marriage with the marriage. And that's one of the first things I tell them. We're not going to fix your marriage with this marriage. What a servant.
Yeah, man.
Tom's pouring me a glass of water right now. So I believe there are 4 spiritual journeys in the home. There's your spiritual journey, your spouse's spiritual journey, your marriage journey, and your child's journey. If a couple is a kid-centered home, I start there. If they've got the child's journey as the number one journey, the kid gets all of our time, energy, resources. They get everything. I don't get any time in this marriage. I don't get time for myself. So we want to flip all those journeys when the kid's at the top, and we're putting the kid at the bottom for good reason, for that child and for us, because you have to tend to your spiritual journey. You have to make sure your walk with the Lord is, and you're 100% responsible for that. You're not going to blame your child on that. You're the adult. Okay, so your journey, and Deuteronomy 6 says, before you get to make sure these truths are upon the hearts of your children, it says these truths are to be upon your heart. So it starts with your heart. Then you serve your spouse's journey without taking responsibility for it. And then the two of you, if we can get those two journeys kicking, and I mean pursuing the Lord with a passion, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. If you will pursue that, the marriage journey is going to take care of itself. I mean, we can look at the skills. We're going to have to talk about communication skills, sexual intimacy skills, apologies. I mean, there's all sorts of factors and skills that we're teaching all the time to couples. But let's get those two journeys down before we work on the marriage journey. And so, and then the reason those 3 journeys are at the top is because I use the unity candle with this, and I don't think I've used this as a prop at any of our events together, but you have the single candle representing the bride's spiritual journey, the groom's spiritual journey, and then the unity candle in the middle. That's the 3rd journey. You bring these 2 candles together, and that represents oneness. I don't have couples blow their individual candles out anymore, like many of us saw in weddings growing up, because those are 3 journeys in the home. And then I pull out a bunch of little birthday candles at the wedding, and I go, and I have these little candles that are 2 inches, and I go, and one day you're going to have a bunch of little candles running around the house. They're going to be watching Dad's journey with the Lord, Mom's journey with the Lord. They're going to be watching the marriage. They have a front row seat to all of this. This is why you would never make this the priority journey. These are the journeys we want to make sure are in order, as your kids have thousands of hours a year that they're watching, they're listening, they're remembering and repeating. Remember, our children, they forget nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So let them see dad's journey, mom's journey, and the marriage journey, and that then will find its way onto their hearts.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I remember so the first time that you and I did an event together a couple of years ago, that the whole theme of that summit was a life worth following, and how do we as men really model
Mm-hmm.
a Christ-centered, focused life. And C.S. Lewis quote that Christianity is really about becoming little Christs.
Yeah.
And if we have that attitude of service, of humility, of thinking of other people as better than ourselves,
Right.
The impact that has, because as we grow in our conformity to Christ, and the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control, all those things just become to more naturally flow out of us, that will greatly impact the way that we treat our spouse.
Yeah. And that's why you never have to tell Laura whether or not you're growing.
Hmm.
She knows. Gary Smalley called it the hidden marriage manual in a woman. She knows. I tell guys who are involved in intense men's discipleship, you never have to tell your wife, I'm reading my Bible, I'm meeting with men's accountability, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Why aren't you? Like, you don't ever have to tell her any of that.
Mm-hmm.
She'll know, because that's not the end all be all. The fruit that you just mentioned is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to see that in you. Amy and I joke from time to time, but she'll every now and then she'll see me in a mode. We'll just call it a mode. And she'll see me going around and she goes, do you need some time alone? And what that means is, you and the Lord, you need to get away for a little bit.
Yeah.
Need to do something. But I don't have to tell her, hey, I read my Bible today. She'll know.
Mm-hmm.
She'll know if my spiritual journey is suffering, and then I get back to the spiritual disciplines that lead me in the direction. So anyway, I think sometimes we forget that. I work with a lot of desperate couples.
Yeah.
They're like, man, this is it. This is the end. I don't know what to do. And when you tell them, we're going to start focusing on each of you individually, they flip out. I mean, they're like, no. We have to start here and find out what we need to shore up here before we talk about the marriage journey.
Mm-hmm. So let's say there's a couple that has been coexisting. They're cohabitating, that kind of thing right now, and it's just a struggle.
They're married.
Yeah, they're married. Yep, they're married.
Yeah.
It's a struggle. Where do they start?
Yeah. Well, this is why I love coaching, because I get to go in, I'm emotionally detached from the couple, and I get to watch the conversation play out. And I get to watch their care for one another, because most of the time it's one or both are completely and totally absorbed with themselves.
Yeah, selfishness. Sure.
And they have an inability to get into the heart, into the life of another person. And so we build these walls. And the guy recently told me, after being married for a long time, it's like the walls of Jericho around her heart. And I have to march around until I go, nope, let's get rid of that word picture real quick.
Yeah.
Instead, go with a gate and find ways that her gate can open to you. It's very Song of Solomon type stuff here, but and that you step in, be someone she can trust when she opens her heart to you, that you'll step in, not take advantage of it, not stay too long, not ask for more, not demand, not be aggressive, not be manipulative, but that you know how to honor her heart when it is open to you. Because right now, you haven't appeared to be one who knows how to care for her heart. And that's what she's wanting. She wants you to care for her heart. And that's one of the reasons I love the coaching side of it, is because I'll be working with couples for a long time, and the guy will say to me, did I just say the wrong thing right there? Well, I wouldn't have said it like that, but I don't know if you notice, every time she shares something from her heart, you turn it around and make it about you. I go, and that's just that's just been your pattern. So to break out of that and to learn how to be an other-focused person and care for your spouse, take care of your own heart. You have a heart too. I think sometimes the spouse will feel like, well, she's holding the trump card. She gets to decide. We're waiting for her to break. Hey, God can do a miracle at any moment. But in the meantime, we're going to pursue what we know to be the right thing. And yes, she may break at any moment, and she may come back to you with open arms, and God may do a miracle in her life and the walls come down. But your biggest mistake will be going at her wall with a sledgehammer thinking you're going to take it down. No, you're not. You're just going to add bricks to it. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get more fortified. learn to care for, I'm just talking to guys now because I know that's who's listening. Learn to care for her heart. Learn to speak kindly to her. Learn to value her. And I promise you, it's the opposite of almost everything we think. If you want to gain your life, you must lose it. If you want to become rich, you must become poor. It's just care for her, speak words of high value over her, prioritize time with her, let her know you're more important than any of my hobbies, you're more important than my job. I care for you. Make your wife the queen of your house and serve her and care for her. And if that's not been your pattern, get around guys that hold you accountable to that and move you in that direction.
Yeah, which obviously that we're very passionate about, and with everything we're the band of brothers and being accountable and being where we allow them to ask us the tough questions, where we really are transparent and vulnerable, which again does go against what maybe how we've been raised or how we've seen in culture and all that. So at what point would you say when guys should say, okay, maybe we need to go look at meeting with someone that's more than just, I don't mean this in a bad way, but just like with our lead pastor who maybe doesn't have the expertise in that, and that yes, they go and they encourage us and they pray for us, but when it's like, what, we need to go and maybe probably visit with someone that can maybe give us some of the coaching or some of the tools.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, like when I work with a couple and there's a lot of bitterness between the both of them, and you work through that bitterness, and forgiveness is truly given. I have to remind the guy who's like, well, she says she's forgiven me, and I believe she's forgiven you. I do. I see that in her. She gets emotional when she talks about it. I'm always looking in my times of coaching with couples, those tender moments, because couples will come in with their arms folded and I don't do what I don't want them to do. I don't go at them. We're going to get through that. We're going to make you unfold your arms. I wait until when I see the tender moment, then I step into it very gently. Okay. And I want guys to hear, when I say tender moment, I'm not talking about you got to start bawling. You got to start crying. But when you see the tender moment, that you're one that can be trusted. And I think this is sometimes where guys make the mistake. Well, she says she's forgiven me. She has forgiven you, but forgiveness is not trust. You've treated her this way for 10 years. She's forgiven you for it, but now you got to build back the trust to where you're going to step into those tender moments with your wife and not be a bully, not be intimidating, not be aggressive, but speak kindly, graciously, tenderly. I just, all these beautiful word pictures in the Song of Solomon when the Shulamite woman, this is a shepherd king speaking about Solomon, the Shulamite woman is strong when she says he browses among the lilies. He's strong guy, right? But he displays tenderness, gentleness, kindness. And I don't think that makes you turn in your man card to be a gentle, kind, tender husband toward your wife. She's not one of the guys. She's not a good buddy that you've got to take on a different approach when you go toward her. And that's why I love encouraging men to take the initiative with that. Just learn to die to yourself, learn to care for her, live with her. 1 Peter 3 says what? With all understanding, so your prayers won't be hindered. So practice that gentleness, that tenderness, that kindness, moving away from intimidation, aggression, manipulation, control, which is typically when I tend to meet the couple.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And move them toward those moments.
What if the roles are reversed in that, Ted?
No, I would say the exact same thing if this was a female podcast.
Yeah. Where the guy just feels like, man, I've been gentle, but I feel like there's just still all this aggressiveness or abrasion towards me.
Yeah. And sometimes, and the stereotypes of men and women are not true 100% of the time.
Sure.
Gary would say they were true about 70, 80% of the time. I would say the same thing. Learn to be others focused. Learn to care for the other person, not just yourself getting your own way. Remember, in sports, we keep score because that's fun. We want a winner and a loser. Sports wouldn't be fun if we didn't have a winner and a loser.
The NFL having ties is ridiculous.
It'd be boring, and you wouldn't watch it anymore. But that's not relationships. In relationships, we do not keep score because we're not opponents. We're teammates. Yeah. We're on the same team. And so I always like to picture a couple in jerseys when I'm with them, and they come in wearing opposing jerseys. But then if you can, after spending some time with them, help them move toward being being teammates. That's the whole approach. If you want somebody to win at work, help them win at home. If you want someone to, win in anything they do, I want to help them win at marriage, because it bleeds over into every single thing they do.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Ted, we're at the end of our time here together, and I can't thank you enough for sharing this space with me. And I'm so grateful for our friendship and ministering alongside one another over the last several years, and looking forward to continue to see how the Lord allows us to do that in the future. But before we get to something that we call the final word here on the Giving Life podcast, where you get 30 to 60 seconds just to share a final word of encouragement, challenge, whatever the Lord lays on your heart to share with listeners and viewers, how can people connect, follow, find out more information? You mentioned helping couples win. Talk about some of your books, that kind of stuff. How can people follow you?
Yeah, if they want to find out about Helping Couples Win, that's helpingcoupleswin.com, and my speaking schedule's on there. Resources are on there. Our church website is woodhills.org. If they want to check out messages and stuff on marriage, speaking schedule's on there as well. But yeah, if you're at a place, I designed Helping Couples Win after we did a research study where we brought all this curriculum and all of these resources into couples and asked them to investigate them. And the words that came out of most marriage resources were outdated, boring, preachy, and feminine. That's why guys weren't engaging with it. And that's why 80% of marriage books are read by women. And I obviously write books, but I know women read them more than men. I get that. So, but when we did Helping Couples Win, I'm like, I want this to be something guys will want to watch. So the videos are 6 to 10 minutes. There you go.
Yeah.
But I was told that's what it needed to be. It's not outdated, boring, preachy, or feminine. It's not a husband bashing time. It's a 24-session course. It seems overwhelming, but I know couples that are going through it one a week. So it's part of their daily delay.
Yeah.
And it covers some heavier topics, but in the middle of it, I have 2 sessions on laughter to kind of break up the heaviness of it. I want men to stay engaged with it, and I designed it in such a way for the guy who says, I'm not going to counseling. You're not going to get me to go to a marriage conference. I'm not going to go read a marriage book. And I'm like, great, but this is something that I think, and I just heard from a pastor today who led a group through it, and it led, how did he say it? It led to conversations they wouldn't normally have, but they weren't so intimidating that the guy shut down on it. So if you want to go through that, I'd love to coach you from afar. With Helping Couples Win.
Oh, that's so good. That's good. All right, my friend. Well, again, this has been fantastic. So give us just your final word.
Well, I'm going to put it in a nutshell, because I think we started it, but we didn't finish it.
Yeah.
Mentor Joe White told me years ago, Ted, you need 3 things for your marriage to thrive: a daily delay, a weekly withdrawal, and an annual abandon. I would encourage you to sit down and plan it out. As the leader of your home, guys, take initiative with it and come to the table with a plan for your wife. Here's what I think our 15 to 20 minutes a day would look like. This is the time I think. Again, you're not setting in stone. You're just taking initiative. The weekly withdrawal, you start planning dates. You start making reservations. You start taking care of the child care. You get things going. And then the annual abandon. Plan a trip. And I know COVID has made this a little weird, but it doesn't keep us from planning. Take initiative with planning a 2 or 3 night out of town annual abandon. All of these are in the Song of Solomon. But you take initiative with those 3 times, put a plan in place, and take that to your wife. And some of you, your wife's going to pass out. She's going to fall over and faint because she's like, what are you doing? But that's showing interest in the marriage and moving from, we're not just going to stay together. I'm not going to get a card at 50 years of marriage going, well, you made it. I want a thriving marriage 50 years from now.
Yeah.
Well, 50 years from now. I'd be really old at my 50th.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Ted. Hey, thanks again for being with me on the Giving Life podcast today. Thanks for sharing this space with me. I love you. I'm just thrilled to have had this time with you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for your ministry to all the folks, not just here in the Sioux Falls and South Dakota area, but just all over the country.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of the Giving Life podcast, where my guest has been pastor and comedian Ted Cunningham. To find out more information about Ted and check out his books and resources, visit his website, helpingcoupleswin.com. Also, if this episode has been helpful to you, please share it with others that may benefit from our conversation. And if you can, I would be so grateful if you would take a minute to rate and leave a quick review of the podcast. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time on RESGEN's Giving Life podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.